This video is going to cover structure as well as writer's craft. Structure is pretty easy, so I'm going to start with that. All structure means is how did the author literally construct their piece of writing? Like, did they write it in 3-column format, or did they write it in basic short story format? Did the author do things like capitalize the first letter of every paragraph with boldface and English style writing? Did they put in like blocks of some sections, like blocked in some writing to make it stand out? Did the writer construct it in such a way that there was a section where it was one word every single line to make a point? So literally, how did they construct the piece? What was the structure of it like? What did it look like? What specific choices did the writer make when saying, this is how I want to lay out my poem, or this is how I want to lay out my narrative or my short story? I want to actually put a quote at the beginning of every chapter that kind of symbolizes what that chapter is going to be about, or things like that. So that's all structure is. Writer's craft is a little more detailed, so I do have a PowerPoint to go with that to help you understand it. Writer's craft is the style that the writer uses when crafting her piece of writing. So let's take a look at what choices go into writer's craft that an author consciously or sometimes subconsciously makes when writing a piece. So first of all, let's try to get this PowerPoint to move. There we go. So look at these following two paintings that I'm going to be showing you. And you can either jot down on a scrap piece of paper or think in your head some of the similarities and some of the differences that you see in the two paintings. And then think about the techniques that were used when creating these paintings. What similarities do you see in the techniques, and what differences do you see in the techniques? So let's take a look at these two paintings. Here they are. You have Edvard Munch's The Scream, and you have Grant Wood's famous American Gothic. We see lots of parodies on both of these paintings. And for people to create parodies, you know that they are very popular, so that the majority of people who see the parodies will actually understand what they're being made or what they're making fun of. These are the original paintings. So what are similar about these two paintings? If you want, you can hit pause and jot down some similarities. And then when you're done, jot down some differences between the two paintings. All right, so let's go to the next slide. The written page is a writer's easel. Authors have style and craft, just like painters do. The painters of these two paintings made conscious decisions about the style of painting they wanted to create, what they wanted to put in the paintings, what message they wanted to send with the paintings, their use of color, their use of paint stroke. The style of the paintings is the craft. Well, that's the same thing writers do. They make conscious decisions with their craft on how they want their writing piece to look. So let's look at some specifics. When the writers make intentional choices in their craft, they're thinking about what figurative language do I want to use? What imagery and details do I want to give? What words do I want to use? They consciously think about my word choice. They consciously think about where they place words in a sentence. The sentence structure, if you drop down another bullet, sentence structure, another word for sentence structure is syntax. So if ever I use the word syntax, I just mean the structure of the sentence. Are they going to put in some, sounds? Are they going to use dialogue in their writing? What are some of the features of their text and their structure? So if you look at structure, it can fit under writer's craft. That's why I put these two together. The actual structure of the piece and any features in the text, like fancy little writing, and that might mean like font is what I'm talking about, boldface. Maybe they leave out words here and there, letters here and there, to make a point. So all of that is intentional decisions by the author, and that's part of their craft choice, their craft, their choices. So here we go with examples of what each thing means. So text features include components of a story or an article or a narrative that are not the main body of the text. And that can be like they include a table of contents. They put in an index. They put in a glossary so that you understand what some of these fantasy words might mean. They might give headings to each chapter. Like I said, they might do bold words. They might do fancy fonts. There could be a sidebar that they have like some quotes stuck to the side that are really big quotes or explanations of some words. Maybe they put in pictures or captions or a diagram that's labeled. Those are all text features. And you see a lot of text features in fantasy and sci-fi genres. Sometimes you see them in realistic fiction and other kinds of genres, but a lot of times you see the text feature choices, that part of the craft, in fantasy and sci-fi. And then text structure, like I said, refers to how the information within a written text is organized. So this strategy helps students understand that a text might present a main idea in detail or a cause and its effects, or have different views or topics, but structure is literally how the text is formatted. And again, that's a purposeful choice by the writer. So writer's craft also encompasses the style, the technique, the tone, the mood, the voice, the structure. All of that goes into writer's craft. I know I'm being redundant, but the more you hear it, the better you'll understand it. Again, being redundant. Categories of the writer's craft could be word craft, structural craft, audible craft like onomatopoeia, bang, pow, bam, or trip, trip, trip. There could be some dialogue. And print features, the visual craft of it, the page layouts, the font choices, the pictures, the diagrams, the sidebar notes, things like that. So let's look at an example. This is called Brian's Plane Crash. It was written by just a student. Brian heard a loud noise as the plane's wings were torn off of the plane. He braced himself. Then his head hit the wheel as the plane hit the trees. The plane went through the trees, then crashed into the water. People were screaming all around him. He unfastened his seatbelt and went out the window to get free of the wreckage. All right. That particular piece that we just read is a typical written type of a piece that a student will write. Just a list of events. That's all. There's really no craft or techniques used in it to make it special, unique, detailed, full of imagery, getting us engaged, making us think and feel and smell and taste and use our senses. This typical piece is kind of boring. It leaves out all those details to make it exciting, to make us get into it, to get us engaged, like I said. When you incorporate writer's craft, though, then you get a lot more excitement out of the piece of writing. So let's look at an expert writer, Gary Paulison, and his excerpt from Hatchet. You don't need to do this. We're just going to take a look at it. There was a great wrenching as the wings caught the pines at the side of the clearing and broke back, ripping back just outside the main braces. Dust and dirt blew off the floor into his face so hard, he thought there must have been some kind of explosion. He was momentarily blinded and slammed forward in the seat, smashing his head on the wheel. Then a wild crashing sound, ripping of metal, and the plane rolled to the right and blew through the trees, out over the water and down, down, to slam into the lake. Skip once on water as hard as concrete, water that tore the windshield out and shattered the side windows, water that drove him back into the seat. Somebody was screaming as the plane drove down into the water. Someone screamed tight animal screams of fear and pain, and he did not know that it was his sound, that he roared against the water that took him, and the plane still deeper down into the water. He saw nothing but sensed blue, cold blue-green, and he raked at the seatbelt catch, tore his nails loose on one hand. He ripped at it until it released, and somehow the water, trying to kill him to end him, Somehow, he pulled himself out of the shattered front window and clawed up into the blue and felt something hold him back. And he felt his windbreaker tear. He was free, tearing free, ripping free. A lot more imagery in this. You can feel what he felt. You can sense what he sensed. You can see what he saw, and you felt his fear. And you knew what he had to do step by step to get free. And it wasn't easy. It wasn't like he just walked away from the wreckage. He worked at it. He fought against death. So now think about what elements of writer's craft did Paulison use in his excerpt, and how did that craft impact you, the reader? Those are things you can think about. Where did he use similes or metaphors, onomatopoeia, personification? Where did he use forms of figurative language? How did he structure it? What was his sentence structure like, his syntax? These are all choices writers make when developing their craft into a piece of writing, a polished piece of writing, a narrative that engages us, that keeps us wanting to read more. That will make the difference when you add your craft to your writing. That will make the difference between a boring piece and an engaging piece. So that's some information about writer's craft. Structure is part of it, part of writer's craft. And so you can continue now in your journey knowing what writer's craft is. If you need help with figurative language, talk to me, but I do know there are exercises and examples in the narrative unit that explain to you the different types of figurative language, like similes and metaphors, personification, hyperboles, onomatopoeia, idioms, allusions. There's so many types of figurative language, and figurative language is a big part of a writer's craft.